Now, is that far enough? No, it's not. But is it a step in the right direction? Yes, it is. So I think it's fair to say that let's do first things first. Let's give the governor the accountability and with it the associated responsibility to deal with the schools. We did it in the city of Cleveland, and I think we're better off for it by having the mayor be responsible. This is, I think, similar and analogous to that. And I think it's fair to say that there were skeptics, and legitimately so. But I think most people would now say that our schools are in better shape by having the school superintendent in Cleveland accountable to the mayor, and I would say the same would hold on the statewide basis. So, Borough, I don't have a magic solution for you tonight, and I can tell you that we are committed, however, to working on this, but we believe this is the second step in our process. The first step was the property tax relief that began to shift the responsibility to the state. The second step is asking that the governor be held accountable. And the third step will be a plan that will be announced next year that will tie school funding reform to school classroom reform. And so you will see that third step, but we are going to focus for the coming months on step number 2, and that is having the director of education be a member of the cabinet, held accountable directly to the governor.
You were at Harbortown back in late August. I won't directly pitch you about that. The city of Euclid is blessed with Lincoln Electric, so our industrial base is relatively strong. We're very competitive worldwide. Euclid's challenge is that we're in competition with all the observant communities to hang on to our residents. We're trying to do that with a housing stock that's 50 to 60 to 70 years old. Harbortown is a way to address that, and we have the plan and we have the investor. But what can you say generally to all of the older communities that are trying to hang on to those residents that support our retail? What does the state have to offer, even though that may not generate a tremendous amount of jobs, but it's critical for the city of Euclid's survival, and I'm sure other communities?
Well, first I'll say a couple things. First, that $1.7 billion Building Ohio Jobs program that the governor announced includes $200 million for what we call the Main Streets Renewal Program that's targeted primarily to the downtown areas of Ohio's cities, suburbs, and towns to deal with kinds of projects that you have just described. Now, $200 million may not be enough to satisfy every need of every community, but it is probably one of the largest investments in the history of our state targeted to the kinds of projects that you have just described. And there will be a competitive process if this bond issue passes, but I think it's fair to say that the governor has recognized that we need to do more for our urban, exurban, and suburban areas that have too long been ignored. I also, as somebody who grew up and still lives in what would be called an older community or first suburb, and many of my members of my council are here today, like Al and Earl and Brian and Lynn and others in Shaker Heights. I get the fact that we have a special responsibility to our urban centers and our older communities, and so we are also doing everything we can to create a policy that says we have to fix it first and invest in the infrastructure we already have. Easier said than done, but I think it's fair to say that there is a problem today with urban sprawl, and that we need to do a better job of preserving our farmlands, preserving open green space, and reinvesting in our urban areas, which is why not only have we targeted the $200 million for the Main Streets Renewal Program, but that $400 million of Clean Ohio is also focused on doing that as well. And that is dealing with those areas that need help with abandoned buildings or abandoned land. So the combination of the two means that we recognize we have a special responsibility. It's also why the governor has appointed someone directly accountable to him, who also worked closely with me, and that is Marvin Hayes, in a new position known as the governor's director or assistant for urban infrastructure and development. For the first time in the history of our state, we've got someone at a high level in a governor's administration who focuses every day on the kinds of projects you're talking about. Thanks.
Mr. Lieutenant Governor, thank you for coming this evening. Your speech is very inspiring. A couple weeks ago, I had the honor of being Tim DeGeeter's guest to the State of the State address. And as a young school teacher and as a councilman, it was very inspiring and encouraging. However, since then, I've talked to some state legislators, and I'm hearing already that there seems to be some members of our state legislature that are already ponying up to fight you and the governor on your plan. And I want to know what we can do as city council members up here in Northeast Ohio to help lobby on your behalf to get this thing done.
Well, thank you for asking. First, let me say I am an optimist, and despite the fact that there are some legislators expressing some concerns, that's part of the legislative process. I was in the state legislature for 10 years, and my feeling is that's not necessarily a sign that we're going to have a fight. It is a sign that we're going to have a debate, but there's two different things. And as long as that debate is civil and respectful and is not partisan, we welcome it. I think that it's fair to ask these kinds of questions, and so I still am cautiously optimistic that we will find bipartisan support for the governor's package. Now, I will say that if we are not able to do that, we are prepared and in fact intend to go directly to the voters and get enough signatures so that either way it's on the ballot. But we have a responsibility to the legislative process to first and foremost focus on trying to persuade our colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support it. And we welcome their questions, and I think those questions, as far as I have seen so far, are all legitimate and fair, and we are not the least bit offended by those questions. Having said that, what you can do, I think a number of things, none of which will surprise you, but all of which would be appreciated. Letters to the editor of local papers, letters to your legislators, resolutions passed by your councils, all in support of that $1.7 billion jobs package, not just because it will help your community, which it will, but because it will help the state, and what helps the state helps you because a rising tide lifts all boats.